fairly small amount of land, even a fourth of an acre or something, you can grow a huge amount of potatoes which store well, they're high caloric value, and can maintain a family through a long winter.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are on this planet listening to us via internet radio, freedomslips.com. I am David Dubine, host of Adapt 2030 on YouTube. Today I have with me Bill Porter, Chief Science Officer and new Agricultural Product Development Lead for the company I Grow Organic. Also joining in, Diamond from the Oppenheimer Ranch Project.
You've got the year-round place with the solar greenhouse. You've got the intermediate protected environment with the tunnel houses. You've got the row crops, the 30-inch beds, and which with great techniques that have been worked out over the past, especially 4 or 5 years. You don't have to own land to do all this, and really for in a third to half an acre, people can produce enormous amounts of food. And if they have the addition of the potatoes, and what the things that we've noted is that if you don't really have to own one, but if you have the use of a two-wheel tractor, and we have ones from China that are exported to Europe. They're fantastic. They're a fraction of the cost of BCS Italian two-wheel tractors that are kind of ones that are typically noted in use in the U.S., but these are imported tractors from Europe. BCS tractor is a division of Ferrari, so they're enormously expensive. All the implements seem to be, expensive as well. Those tractors that are very good value. We have the implements, which allow you to automatically or very efficiently bulk plant potatoes, and we have a harvester that you can go through, and rather than digging out one by one, which is plant by plant, there are potato harvesters that are fixed to the back of the two-wheel tractor, and you can go through and harvest a whole large area of these. If you go online and just do potato harvesting on YouTube, you'll see these in action, and they're fantastic. So anyway, this is an integrated system of food production intensively done in a small area. This isn't theory. These are proven systems in use in very, very northern climates. And all the details and the educational material is available all the way from free, all the way up to, I think the one at Neversink, they've got one kind of would get people started for about less than $300. But the full-on commercial grower, which would be kind of the equivalent of almost like a degree course, but absolutely focused on food production, I think that's $2,000. So I'm not recommending any of these ones, but I'm just letting people know that if people are concerned about food security and they want to investigate the systems that are in use, highly successful in all the details, all the way down to tiny details of planting all the different crops, the best ones to have, whatever what the most valuable ones are, growing conditions, etc. And all three of these are from areas that are, very cold: British Columbia, Quebec, and upstate New York. So these are applicable to, harsh climate extremes.
Hey, Diamond, I wanted to come back to you for a second here. With resources around your area, Are there any ag co-ops or government assistance for farmers? What type of ag co-ops do you know of around your area? Or what kind of help can they offer? Because I remember it was either you or Christian talked about that during our one discussion. Something about the ag in the area.
I could definitely expound on that. So if you're in North America and you live in any of the 50 states, you have a local agricultural extension in your area. It's usually associated with the local state university. And at the local ag center, they will have all the information on what is growing the best that year. They even offer discounted seeds. In my area, I get seed potatoes in the first week of May that you have to order in March for 50 cents a pound. 5 varieties, including purple Colorado blue and pink mountain and some amazing potato varieties here. So you can literally for $20 grow 2,000 pounds of potatoes by visiting your local ag extension. They also offer different types of proven seeds from the year before that are guaranteed to work in your zone. So you need to get to your ag extension because it's your number one resource for local information. Additionally, they cover bees and all things agricultural, including where you can buy livestock and chickens and things like that. Another amazing thing you can source is the Conservation District. This is through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Here in Pagosa Springs, our Conservation District office they have a nursery, and you can buy all of the native trees, plants, and shrubs, including wild plum and fruit trees and native fruit bushes and perennials that are local to your area and grown in your area right from these conservation districts. You order around the new year, January, and the plants come in March. And they're as cheap as $1 a stem for trees. It's really worth getting into. So you need to source these kind of things or you're new to it. That is the best source for information that you need because you need local information.
Bill, first of all, was so thorough in his description there about thriving in the future. It doesn't matter what the climate does. If you know what you're doing, you can definitely thrive. And him pointing out the Rodale Institute in Pennsylvania, from where I'm from, when I was organizing for March Against Monsanto, I work with the people who run that, Coach and all those guys at Rodale. That place has been doing scientific research in organic farming for decades. It goes back to the 1800s, one of the first publishers to publish organic gardening books back at the turn of the century. And they were experimenting on the first solar greenhouses back in the 70s. And they've proven that biodynamic integrated organic farming produces higher yields, higher nutrition.
Yeah, you touched on having some livestock, chickens, etc. around there because, microgreens can be used for a source to either grow crickets to feed chickens or chickens themselves can eat different types of greens. So the ag extension there, what types of what are they doing with smaller animals that can be grown? A cow takes up an enormous amount of space. It eats an incredible amount of food. And then when we step down into something like a pig or a goat, that's another, goats are much more efficient, by the way, and they produce a lot of good milk that we can use. And you can make butter, cheeses, yogurts, anything that you could do with dairy, traditional from cows. But when we take a step down further, even into the smaller types of animals that, let's say chicken, okay, that's pretty good size. But what else are they talking about there in your local area that can be used for some type of protein source?
You can literally start with very little money, $20 for a breeding pair, and have thousands of rabbits. So they're very easy to skin, easier than a chicken. They're literally as easy to clean as a fish once you know how to do it. So rabbits grow quickly. They can be fed easily on fodder that you grow from low-price grain that you sprout.
That's another thing that we've kind of thought about a little bit. But if you look on the website, people don't think about it. When Diamond was saying you can buy pellets, but we sell a pelletizer, and the people usually don't think about that. But that's an especially good possibility. Just if you're growing alfalfa or other things, I'm sure you could come up with a mix, feed it into the pelletizer, at the right dryness and produce your own pellets, for animal feed, either for chickens or whatever. Now, in addition to that, it can also be used, if you have sawdust or whatever, you can actually pelletize wood chips, and these can be a source of energy automatically fed into pelletizer heaters. There's one other thing that I think you mentioned just at the start of the program, but the site that we mentioned too it's called Ag Fiber Tech, AGFIBERTEC. And you mentioned that you can produce fertilizer, but one of the things that may turn out to be very, very significant about this technology, which we're kind of associate with, at least for North America, for this technology is it's been developed in Australia. And what it does is uses waste agricultural fiber, or that can be from any number of sources, all the way from bagasse, which is the byproduct of sugarcane processing, to cassava, to perhaps even sugar beets, and lots of other things like that. And through a fairly straightforward process, that can be converted to animal feed, but especially for cattle. So you can the problem with most cattle feed is it's a grain-based product, and that's a problem on a number of levels. The first is that if you're feeding a huge amount of grain, which takes a lot of water, a lot of energy inputs to produce, then basically the cattle are competing with the grain that humans could eat. Now the second thing is that cattle are in a group called ruminants, and these ruminants are basically animals that have evolved to process fiber. And so they have a number of stomachs, one of which, things go down into and they kind of ball up, and then they're belched up and chew a cud. It continues to be broken down with kind of mechanical grinding. But these animals, which would include deer and elk and camels, I think sheep and goats, cows, giraffes, maybe a few other ones, antelope, whatever. So anyway, they're designed to kind of go out, eat a lot of grass, and then go back to cover or protected area and then digest the food, because it's just like the veggies, the fiber. It's nutritional, but it's not calorically dense. So you have these animals that have evolved through the millennia for eating fiber, and grass-fed beef, etc. That's kind of that's a great quality of food and healthy animals. But then you put them in a feedlot, in so-called CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, and they're crowded together. They're fed a grain-based, either corn or soybeans or a combination of things like that. So anyway, one last thought about that is that what's created in these ruminant stomach cattle is a very acid condition. They don't do well. They have diarrhea. And there's also types of bacteria that grow that are terribly pathogenic and cause terrible sickness, hemorrhagic kidney diseases, etc., infections in people. But with this process at Ag Fiber Tech, you basically use waste fiber, like the shaft, the straw, and other things like that. You can use the grain, obviously, for food, but the other stuff that either is burned or God knows what they do with it, or dumped back on the field, that can be converted to a highly nutritious, much lower cost animal feed that does a number of things. It makes it cheaper to feed animals, reduces the cost potentially of the meat product, the protein result of feeding animals, and it helps lessen the demand on grain, so that if you're having these kind of cataclysmic, epical, cold, whatever, cold spells that damage the wheat harvest in the upper Midwest, etc., where there's pressure on prices, you can imagine if this is adopted on, at some level, is going to reduce the price pressure on the grain so that to be more available for folks to eat. So anyway, that's, I just thought it was, I should mention that as well in terms of it might be of interest to people to take a look at that.
Well, I would agree, because when we come forward, one of the things that'll disappear off the shelf first might be meats. When we're talking about the price to, raise cattle, if the price of our food's going up, and it's my own firm belief also that as we move forward into 2020 and beyond, that the price of food is going to be so expensive that you will have to pre-buy it. It will not be similar today, where you will walk into a supermarket and just get anything off the shelf. It's going to morph slightly. The crops will still be for sale, but they're going to be so limited and so expensive that people will collectively have to come together to buy a lot that will be theirs. Now, they can split it off, or they can choose to sell it to a manufacturer, which in turn will then deliver the finished goods or finished food products to that group of people. And this will all be facilitated using cryptocurrency through smart contracts going forward into the future. And that's why I firmly believe the new tech moving in with the collapse of the economy. The economic collapses are 100% assured during these grand solar minimums. Global shipping is going to be greatly reduced. We're going to, come back into local type of production and consumption. And from that as well, with the loss of jobs, the loss of crops, the expensive food, and that's going to decimate the economy, because people are going to spend most of their discretionary or disposable income on rising food prices. 2008, we could not drive. You could carpool, you could ride a bike. There's so many solutions to not using fuel, as we saw in 2008 and 9. $6 a gallon gasoline crushed the economy, but not everybody drove. But this time, everybody needs to eat, and you can't not eat, period. So when we start putting all this money into food, it's going to pull away from the economy. So when we have things like cattle being raised, with enormous amounts of grain going into raising cattle, those are going to be some of the first things that get clipped at the edges. Wild meats, Diamond, you talk about elk up in your area, some other things that are around in local areas, deer. But the traditional, what you're talking about, feedlot cattle raising, I think is going to be a thing of the past, or greatly reduced, to where having meat will be the ultimate luxury. Well, you have to be seriously wealthy to afford steaks in the future, because unless you're raising your own cattle, they're just not going to be for sale. People will demand that the food gets rediverted away from the cattle to bring prices down. And ethanol, the way we waste all of the corn on the ethanol is just criminal. The way that we've been forced and railroaded and ramroded to pass these laws. The ethanol, the density of it doesn't even have the same density for what petrochemical or what gasolines or diesel fuels have. I mean, when you're looking at how much you have to put, 1.25 gallons of ethanol to even equal 1 gallon of gasoline in the calorific, burn on that. So many things are going to be changing. I think the ethanol mandate will quickly be taken away and then replaced with human consumption crops. That'll be a first to go in the next few years. And then this reduction in cattle production as well. This whole cattle raising is going to be, I think it's a sunset industry at the moment. Moving forward. Now, Diamond, I don't know if you agree with any of that.
I do, but like we were talking earlier, as we descend to the grand solar minimum, in the first few solar cycles, large volcanic events happen, and if we have a VEI 7 or 8, I don't know if this is going to be continuing. The time is now to start preparing. I behoove everyone to start taking steps to make sure that you are self-sufficient moving forward.
And I'll be doing the same in an urban environment. I'm planning to also make steps to get back to a more safer location, because out here in Asia, it's just too packed as it is. So I'm trying my own urban environment gardening to pass along the information here. Plus, I want to be, see how far I can really take it in self-sufficiency. I'm not going to be raising rabbits on my balcony, but, going to the Uber with the green production, absolutely. Moving forward, there's going to be a lot of challenges. And if we can compile all this information into, I want to be a world leader with this. If people come here for great, clean, precise, correct information, not only on the grand solar minimum, but in ways to prepare and solutions that are available, so we can start to talk to those guys. They know about the solutions, they know about the problem, and these are the guys you want to talk to. I'm interested to see what you have coming, and then we can compare notes as we move forward with all of these different, shall we say, projects that we have. You talked about suspicious observers, and you went to join and visit, talk to, and see the Observing the Frontier conference. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What were people talking about there with the grand solar minimum, or the effects from the sun, or what were they talking about? What's happening with our, shall we say, weather systems changing, and forecasts for the future on how quickly it's going to change.
Picture 1,000 people, the entire gamut on the planet, from the completely mainstream scientist to the fringe. So we had a great demographic there. And it seems that the consensus concern from A to B is the fact that the Earth's poles are going to flip, and all scientific data shows that the flip is going to occur in an odd way. Instead of them rotating on opposite sides of the planet when they flip, they're actually meeting. They're meeting on one side near Indonesia, and that's going to happen between 2035 and 2050, and that's also we're in the peak of the grand solar minimum. So the catastrophic events that are related to that have a lot of people concerned, to say the least. But really refreshing group of people that are all speaking about preparing for the inevitable, whatever that may be, and however it manifests. So we have a lot of groups of people that are getting together, acquiring land and making strategically planning to survive and thrive in the future by creating a network of people that are all like-minded, doing the same thing, trying to unsubscribe to the unsustainable empire model that we've been, the rat race, so to speak, and getting back to nature and learning how we can do it on our own.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I've seen the same model forecast for the poles coming and converging right over Indonesia, and I find that really incredibly interesting. Over the last 4 grand solar minimums that have produced substantial global crop losses, those eruptions occurred in Papua New Guinea and 3 of them in Indonesia. So you start to take a look at what is with this equatorial band volcanic activity that plunges our Earth into a cooler environment. But then when that whole culmination of the poles meeting over Indonesia, what does that have to do magnetically or magma under our Earth? What's happened to the magma chambers under the Earth at that time in those same explosive vicinity of all that volcanic region down there? And we're really coming into a very special time. It's a great time to be alive. There's so many things changing right now. I, for one, am so happy to be born during this period of human existence. I mean, we live better than kings and queens did even 200 years ago. We have better lives now than any king or queen in history did, in terms of technology, comfort, lack of disease. People would get sick from just sleeping on their beds because they didn't have springs in there with, they used to pack it full of, straw, like you were talking about, Bill, that can be converted into animal food, but then rats would live in there and people would get sick just from living on their beds. I mean, the way we live our lives now, we don't live in drafty castles. Everything's pretty much taken care of. Our medicine's at high levels, except for the vaccines, of course, which poison people. But in terms of, if you get sick, there's antibiotics. I'm so happy to be alive now to be part of the change, disseminate the information, but know that the changes are coming and kind of look for them and see them happening. And Bill, I know you started on this whole sojourn as well because you saw that same crystal ball of things moving in a certain direction. Because originally we talked about using a container to grow up in the Arctic Circle with incredibly thick insulation to try to grow microgreens in the Arctic. And that's how we got started on our conversation. But, we're kind of running out of time. So, Bill, I'll let you both wrap up here. But, Bill, I'll start with you for the next 3 minutes. Your crystal ball, what do you see going out?
Well, it's always hard. Nobody has a crystal. I mean, people have crystal balls, but in terms of how it's really going to unfold, has yet to be determined. There are unknown unknowns. But I think you were saying, if there's a volcanic eruption that really precipitates a crisis, why then, hopefully that won't be the case, and we'll have time to prepare. But what we're all about, the agro-organic, small group that we are, we feel that we're offering some real answers, some solutions. There's some, we didn't get a chance to talk about the mushroom logs that turbocharge the veggie production by 20 to 30% with CO2. We've got an electric cart that really turbocharges the whole no-till concept, can be used inside the greenhouses and probably replaces the labor of somewhere between 5 and 10 people. So there's a lot of fantastic developments that I feel are very hopeful and scalable. These can be produced at levels that will be affordable and available to a lot of people to help them prepare for the unknowns that we're talking about and potential problems in the future. So
great. And Diamond, any last thoughts for you to wrap up here? You have about 2.5 minutes.
Just want to thank Bill for iGrow Organic and the products that he's researched and is offering to the public.
These are the types of solutions we need moving forward.